Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. I hope you guys are all doing great. As you can tell from the title down below, I'm going to be sharing with you kind of what our homeschool looks like, specifically our homeschool students and kiddos when it comes to those days where either A, they are reluctant in learning versus those days where they're just struggling learning. So the learner is struggling instead of just being reluctant. To me, there is a big difference between the two, and for me personally, I also mix the two up quite often. So I wanted to go into the difference with those two with you and kind of give you an idea of what it looks like in our home and what we do when we are having those days. And as a disclaimer, I actually also reached out to my own mom. If you're new here, I'm actually a second generational homeschooler. So I reach out to my mom a lot when it comes to homeschooling things and ideas, philosophies, and just like tips and tricks and everything like that along the way. This is actually only my second full year homeschooling. So when it came to really thinking about the content of this video, when it came to reluctancy versus a struggling learner, I did want to reach out to her. I am one of 7 kiddos. She homeschooled all 7 of us, K through 12. I have one younger brother who has yet to graduate. He's in high school right now. And she has had collectively 38 years of a homeschooling experience. So I typically always go to her when I have those needed questions or needed answers to my questions and things like that. And so she actually really helped me with this perspective on really making sure that I knew the difference between the reluctant learner versus just not ready to learn. And there is a really big difference. After I talked to her, I realized there was a huge difference in those two. I also wanted to mention that this is actually a part of a collaboration hosted by Ashley from Joyful Noise Learning. I will have her video and channel linked down below, so be sure to go check that out. She'll also be giving some great tips and advice for if you do have that reluctant learner in your home, as well as a playlist of other mamas also sharing things about either reluctancy or that struggling learner, and just really honestly a broad band of subjects. But yeah, I do hope you guys go watch that playlist and get some inspiration and encouragement from that. I know I'm looking forward to doing that as well. And yes, let's go ahead and get into today's video. So when I first sat down to make the outline for this video, I honestly didn't even know where to start when it came to the term reluctance in our homeschool, because for me it was like a really broad term and I didn't really know what direction to take it. So I just straight up looked up what reluctance meant. And I was really surprised that it straight up just meant the unwillingness to do something or the disinclination to do something. And so at that point, when I looked up that it was like really just the complete unwillingness to do something, that really made a big difference for me, because I realized that the reluctant homeschooler is really different than the struggling homeschool, especially when it comes to little people. And it's funny because when I think of a reluctant homeschooler, I do think of those days where you might just wake up in a bad mood, you don't have a good attitude, and you just don't want to do anything. Like me as a mama has those days. And I do know that my little people have those days too, and there has been a lot of those days where they wake up and they just don't want to do, they don't want to do school, they're not happy about it, they're not excited about it, and it doesn't matter what you do as a homeschool parent. You can do all the unit studies, you can do all the fun games and things like that. There's just those days where they're not interested and they don't want to do it, and that to me kind of describes that reluctant learner type thing, if that makes sense. Versus the struggling learner will have those days where they may be excited about school and we'll get into it, and then we open the book and the concept is just way too difficult for them to handle. They cannot grasp it. So again, that leads to a very frustrated day, a very stressful moment between mama and the student, everything like that. So I wanted to share kind of what we do on those 2 different days, types of days I should say. But I'm going to rewind again and go back to that reluctant learner and kind of what we do when it comes to that reluctancy in learning. And like I mentioned before, I also reached out to my mom and said, what did you do for us when we were just having those bad attitudes? We didn't want to learn and things like that. So these are just a few of the things that worked for us. I'm going to start with what we kind of do in our own home. But on those days where the kiddos just wake up and the attitudes just are not right, and on those days I try to also give them grace and also remember that I too as an adult have those days. I mentioned that before, that I'm a big advocate for remembering that we also have those big feelings and we also have those big emotions and we don't handle things in the right way as adults. And so when we put that idea of perfectionism on the kids where we don't allow them to have those bad days. We don't allow them to have bad feelings. I think that cannot really be a safe area either. So I try to extend grace when I can and try to remember that everyone is going to have those bad days. It doesn't matter who you are and how old you are and how little you are, you will have those days. So on those moments, on those days when I realize that after we sit down at the school table, we're having an attitude issue or an attitude problem or just a rough day in general, where we just cannot get past that mood, so to speak, we'll just simply close the school books. We won't do school that day. We just will not do school that day. It's not worth the stress on mama and baby or mama and little people when you are having that bad attitude. And then my mom also did this for us when we were little too. And that is honestly on those days, sometimes you might even take the rest of the week off from the academic work and you just pour into little people with character building stories, with quality building stories. You just spend time together connecting, because a lot of the times when those attitudes do come out, they're trying to tell you something else in those attitudes. I know you know what I mean. But I have found that when you just close that school book and you just sit on the couch together, you can read a character book. You can read about like having a good attitude and everything like that. And just spending the day doing that, reading the good literature books. They're still getting a ton of literature. They're still getting a ton of those big words into their brain. They can learn a lot by just listening. But sometimes that's what it takes when you do have that reluctancy in learning, is just to step back and maybe work on their character and work on their happiness and how do you go about having a happy heart even when you don't want to do something, because me as a mom has to work on having a happy heart when I don't feel like doing something. And so trying to get that idea into their minds a little bit of, yes, it's fine if you're not having a good day. Sometimes I don't have a good day, but let's work on together how to have a more happy heart when we're doing something that maybe we don't want to do. And then that is character building for both, honestly, mommy too, but very character building for the kiddos as well. But it is important to eventually get them to the place where I know you don't want to do it, but we're going to choose to be happy anyway. So it's a process. That's just kind of what we do, is we just close the books. We go and read character building stories. I always try to acknowledge the feelings as far as saying, me as your mama, I feel the exact same way sometimes. And that's okay. It's okay to have those big feelings and let it be okay. I have to tell myself this a lot, it's okay. Because like I said, I have them too. So anyway, that is how we kind of treat the days where the learner or the student is having a little bit of the unwillingness to do things. So we just step back and read stories, and yeah, that's how we treat that. So when it actually comes to the struggling learner, and like I said, I feel like there's a big difference between that reluctant learner and struggling learner. And this honestly is something that my mom did with us kiddos as well. And I feel like a lot of homeschool moms probably do this, but me specifically, I really fall into this trap of I'll sit down with my student, we'll open up that textbook, and if he cannot grasp a certain concept or do a certain thing, and my siblings and myself as well, if we couldn't grasp a certain concept or do a certain thing, then as a homeschooling mama, it's really hard for me to not be like, oh my goodness, my student's behind because this textbook and this guy says that he should know this by this age and he should be able to do this and he should be able to grasp this. And then my mom described it as letting the curriculum sneak in and be your boss without you even realizing it. And it's really easy to do. And I didn't realize that I was doing it because I have explained several times on my channel that we use the Good and the Beautiful language arts for kindergarten. And I have also talked about that it was very challenging for my kindergartner, that it was above grade level. And yes, it is a common consensus across the board that it is above grade level. But still, as that homeschooling mama sitting there seeing him struggle, I was like, my child's behind, he's struggling. When in reality, that was the same thing across the board. But I allowed this curriculum to kind of be my boss, so to speak, and tell me that my child was behind. When in reality, I was like, he just may not be ready for this concept. And so that's when we stepped back and we shut the book because it was just leading to way too much frustration. I was feeling guilty that he was behind, when in reality, according to every other textbook, he was on grade level, whatever. So we closed the textbook. Once we got to Unit 2, we just read his beginning books, the Box A set, and we started the Box B set, and we just read every single day. We would read a lot every single day. So apart from doing a little bit of math in the morning, we would just read, and he would read, and he would become more fluent with like the words that he knew and his sight words that he knew. And we go over our little games and our flashcards and our sight word ladders and things like that. But it was really easy to fall into that trap of like, oh my goodness, my child's behind, because this curriculum is telling me that my child's behind. So when it comes to the struggling learner, I've learned to not label them as the struggling learner, so to speak. They may just not be ready. But with one of my siblings, they were dyslexic and they weren't reading until they were probably 13, 14, something like that. And what my mom said in regards to kind of like how they kind of taught her and her education in those early years and those middle school years when it was really challenging and when it was a very definite a struggling learner, is they took what she was passionate about, and I love that they did this, and it's very inspiring to me, but they took what she was passionate about and what she just adored and loved, and they just bought her everything that they could think of that would help her thrive in that area. They bought her, it's art by the way, she loves art, and so they bought her like art books, and they bought her pastels, and they bought her watercolors, and just everything imaginable so she would get hands-on in this thing that she loved, and she would develop her skill. And she's just an incredible artist today. And did she learn to read eventually? Absolutely. And did she do like all the algebra and everything like that? Absolutely. And she graduated and everything like that. And she's so bright and intelligent, but she is one of the most gifted artists like that I know personally in my life. I know you probably don't know a lot. I'll see if I can insert some pictures here of some of her recent work and portraits and everything that she has done. They're just gorgeous. And I really look back and attribute that to my parents recognizing, you know what, she is not ready to do reading, and she is not ready for this concept, but they are going to take what she is passionate and interested in and put everything that they can into that and let that feed and inspire her. And then she was also really interested in music. And so at age 11, they put her in violin lessons. A few years later, I actually started violin as well. And then by learning how to read music, by learning how to read kind of like that left to right, like you would music, she also then began to connect the dots in her head on how to actually read a book or read a sentence like the correct way. And I love that as well, but they really pushed those arts with her because that's what she was passionate about, and that's what she loved. And so my mom encouraged me that like for that really big struggling learner to tap in, study the child, see what they are really passionate about, and make sure that their entire world is that. Because you never know, you could be creating your own genius, and as my parents did, they created such a talented artist by acknowledging the fact that yes, she's struggling, but oh my goodness, is she so talented like in these areas. So that's kind of what they do with the struggling learner. Hi. And I also find that to be very inspiring to me as well. But yeah, I am gonna go ahead and leave the video at that before it gets too long, but I wanna thank you guys for being here. I hope this encouraged you in some way, whether it be you have that reluctant learner who may need an encouraging hand from mama, or if you have a struggling learner, in which case they also need an encouraging hand from mama. But I hope you guys got something from today's video. Hi, it looks like we've been eating markers. Uh-oh, did we eat markers? Yeah, I will go ahead and say goodbye again and get these little ones some lunch. You ready for some lunch? And yeah, you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you in our next video. Bye.